Hi, so today I'm going to be taking a look at my new Evil Wreckoning frame. This video is just going to be a short video looking at the frame and the details of it. I'll also be doing a follow-up video where I'll be doing a bike build using the parts that you can see in front of you here. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out on the channel. Without further ado, let's take a look at the frame. Here's the frame out of its box and put into a stand. I have it in the Coral Reefer colour. Now this colour is pretty hard to capture on camera because it tends to shift with the light. So it can go from a sort of pinky orange to a reddish orange depending on what light it's in. It seems to be coming out pretty orange on the camera from what I can see, sort of a reddish orange. Now this is a really loud colour, so if it's not your flavour, they also do a black version of this frame. Now it's using matte paint on it. Now I've never actually had a frame with matte paint before, so it'd be interesting to see how that holds up, whether it attracts much more dirt or anything, or it's easier to clean. But I'm going to be putting an Invisi frame kit on it as well, so just to add extra protection on it. I've got it in the XL size, and I've got it with the stock shock, which is a RockShox Super Deluxe coil. Now they use obviously coil springs, so you have to make sure you get the correct spring size for you. Evil has a chart on their website, and obviously they're going to tailor them to each particular size. This one, for example, has a 450 pound spring on it. I'm going to start at the front here and look at the head tube and the headset. So what they've done is they've replaced the vinyl cut decals that they used to have on the head tube with the metallic badge now, which looks nice. It's still got some plastic on, we'll save that for later on. And then it has 4 holes on the front, so you can mix and match however you want to have your particular brakes. And it comes with the headset. What they've done is they've swapped over from a FSA to a Cane Creek, which I'm really pleased about, because the FSA on the previous generation was a nightmare if you ride in the UK because it had no ceiling. Now this uses standard bearings, but it uses slightly different cups. So on the top it's a 0 stack 44 and it runs a 41mm bearing, and on the bottom it's a 0 stack 62 and it runs a 52mm bearing. The bearings are standard. The only thing that's slightly out is the 0 stack 62. You can find it, but it's pretty rare. But as I say, they're already pressed in anyway, and you can get replacement bearings for it pretty easily. So here's the bearings that come with it. So these are Cane Creek ones, and they're actually enduro bearings. So you literally just have to place them in. Let's say they're standard bearings, so they're easy to get replacements for. It comes with a crown race, which has a seal on it, which is surprisingly effective. As I say, the previous generation was a nightmare because it had no sealing, so you would always destroy your lower bearing. And then it comes with the top, just got the compression nut integrated in. Again, this has a seal on the top. This is the 40 of the Cane Creek series. You can upgrade to the 110 if you want, and they also do a angle set, so you can adjust it by 1 degree or 1.5 degrees if you want to slacken out the head tube. I'm going to leave mine as stock for a while. I'm pretty happy with the head angle. It's very similar to what I used to run on my previous one. It's 64.6 I think it is. It may be slightly off from that, but it's pretty close to that. It also comes with a new style head cap as well. So this is the new style one. Here's the previous one that they used to run. So just a slight variation. I think the new one looks much nicer. On the top tube they've got a small Evil logo. This is a vinyl cut decal, so you can remove it if you want. And also got the Evil logo here on the Downtube. This is a vinyl cut as well. I believe the newer frames are starting to come with it painted, although I'm not sure if that's just the Insurgent, but I know I have seen some of the newer frames with it actually painted on rather than being a sticker. Moving further down, you've got the water bottle mounts, and then you've got the familiar Evil Delta Link. They've modified this slightly from the previous version. They've changed the dog bones slightly as well. This frame uses Enduromax bearings on the trunnion mounts, and it also uses them on the dog bones. This is the flip chip here. It looks really complicated, but it's not. It's really just 3 bearings, but it's using a few additional bolts to hold it in place. And what you can do is take out these 3 bolts here, flip this link round, and you get into the extra low setting. So it's in the low by default, and then you can flip it over to turn it into the extra low. It's a pretty easy job to do. These are all just 5mm bolts, apart from the sag indicator one where you have to use a 4mm on one side and a 5 on the other. But it's pretty straightforward. So the frame uses internal cables now. So the way it works is it comes with these little plastic guides, and on the bottom of the frame here it has the exits for the ports. So you've got one for the gears and one for the brake. You can also feed the dropper post in as well. So I'm just going to feed one through from the front to show you what it looks like. It's internally guided, so it will just pop out. You can just see it in a second. So it just comes out, and then you just put one of these plastic ports on to hold it in place. Nice and easy to do. None of this faffing on with magnets and cables. And once the cable comes out of the top tube, you just feed it into the holes here, which are at the top of the seat stay. You just feed that in. I'm going to be running a axis setup, so I'll not be using this, but if you are running gears, they also come with these little protectors, which you just put on the frame there to stop any frame rub. And then you've got another Evil logo vinyl cut decal on the back here. Moving down to the bottom bracket area, you've got the main pivot bearings here. So this is really easy to get access to. You just need to use a 6mm and an 8mm on the other side, and then you can undo that and remove the axle which is in there. And it's pretty straightforward to remove them. On the previous frame it was basically the same, except it was covered by the bigger chain guide. Speaking of the chain guide, they've shortened it down and it's much simpler. It also has some preset guides here for the different chain rings that it can take. I'll just put a bit of light on here, see if you can see the numbers written along here. So you can run it from a 30 to a 36. You can also remove that if you don't want to run it. The bottom bracket is a standard threaded 73mm bottom bracket, so nice and easy to work with. And it uses a 2 mounting system, so it's an ISCG, but they've just removed the top one. So I'm personally going to be running my Fun bash guard on here. And then on the bottom of the shock here, it's got a nice little cutout, so it can actually drain out the water. On the previous one, you tended to get a little swimming pool nestle in there. And then on the bottom, you've got a nice rubber protector. The chainstay protector has been modified from the previous version, so it extends much further along, right up to where the chain guide is, and it has what Evil calls their sound mounds, which are nice squishy lumps. Allegedly this helps with chain slap. We'll see how it holds up. And the rubber goes on the bottom, and it's also up here on the seat stay. And then back here you've got the standard Evil Derailleur Hanger. I wish they'd adopted the UHD with standard, but these Evil ones are pretty easy to find. Another vinyl decal on the back here, and the exit port for the shifter cable. And then you've got a 180mm post mount on here. I'm not sure why it's not 200 for this bike, it seems crazy, but anyway, that's what it comes on. So you're just going to have to make sure you get your corresponding brake mount adapters. So here's a look at the back. So this bike uses the Super Boost standard, which is 157mm. This tends to upset quite a few people, although personally I'm actually looking forward to it because it adjusts the Q factor, or the width of your pedals, because the chain line is actually a 56 instead of a 52, which means that you end up with your cranks being slightly wider apart, which as a taller person I struggle with the narrow Q factors because I can't get my feet as stable as I would like them. I've ended up having to run slightly longer pedals to compensate for this, but now that the cranks are going to be slightly further out, hopefully it should ride a bit better for me. So it's just a standard through axle. It does come with some Loctite on it. I've noticed all the bolts do have green Loctite on them, which is nice because a lot of bikes, when you get them, they tend to rattle themselves loose straight away. Here's the exit hole for the brake line. Again, it's just a push through like the other ones. Another benefit I've noticed just by looking at this frame is that the tyre clearance is much improved compared to the previous version, where I used to struggle with 2.4 inch tyres, but I reckon I could easily get a 2.5 in this without much trouble. And then up to the seat tube. The seat tube on this is quite long compared to some of the newer bikes. I reckon it could probably be about half would be ideal, but I've got pretty long legs, so it's not really going to affect me. It does have pretty decent insertion depth, so you can put the longest post you want in it. I'm running a 210 on this one. Evil has changed over to the 30.9 standard, which is a shame because on the previous version it was a 34.9, which I actually really liked, because you could end up with a stiffer dropper post because they could actually add extra material and build the post out to make it stronger. But this should do. It's fairly easy to get posts for this size. And just to show you on the non-drive side, so this is where the sag indicator is. So what you basically do is just push that up and then sit on the bike and it will push it through, and you'll be able to see whether you've got the 30%. The shock also has the markings on it as well, so that's probably what I'm going to be using. Sag indicator is there to give you a general guide. And one thing I also wanted to point out is all of their bolts have the torque spec on them, which is nice and handy when your hands are greasy and you don't want to have to go and check on the internet to see what the spec is. Here's a look at the frame in comparison with the original version of the Reckoning. So what they've done is the usual enduro treatment of longer, lower, slacker. So they've increased the reach on the top tube, they've slackened the head angle, and they've steepened the seat angle, as well as changing from the boost to super boost on the rear, so you've got better tyre clearance on the back. They've modified their linkage slightly, so the curve is slightly different, and they've also moved to the trunnion mount shock. Here's a look at the top tube profile. So it's very similar from the previous one, just slightly more refined. So here's the difference between the seat tubes. As you can see, the original one is much fatter than the newer one. And then moving around the back, I've had to use a towel to hold this, hopefully it won't fall if I move it. As you can see, the new one is much wider at the back. And here's the bottom of the frames. So you say it's the same cup as the previous one, same bearing as well. Protector's slightly different. One thing I have noticed, on the previous generation there wasn't much of a gap between the bottom bracket shell and the stay, so what tended to happen was mud would get compressed into here. On the newer one it's got a slightly wider gap, so you'll be able to hose it out if any mud gets caught in there, whereas the previous one you had to actually take the shock out and cycle the suspension to be able to get right in there. So that was a look at my Evil Wreckoning frame. As I said at the start, I'm going to be doing a follow-up video to this where I'm going to build this frame up into a bike, so if you want to watch that, keep an eye on the channel. But till then, if you've got any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the box below, and if you got this far into the video, I appreciate it, and thanks for watching.